Hello you guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Holly, this is She Reads. In today's video we are going to be talking about the top books that I have read basically since the beginning of the new year. So if you are new here, you may not know that I have taken a little bit of a break from this channel over the past few months. I haven't posted anything. I posted a video last week, but you guys have not been updated on my reading at all. So I have quite a big wrap up to do. I'm going to split it into two parts. I'm going to do the best books that I've read so far this year, as well as the worst books that I've read so far this year. And basically how I'm going to rank it is anything 4 stars and up is going to be in the best, and anything 3 stars and lower is going to be in the worst. I have been very, very lucky this year to have read a lot of really good books. And that is why I am going to cut it off at 3, lower being the worst. Because I had so many 4 and 5 star reads that I only had like a few 2 stars. So I thought I'll just put the 3 stars in with the 2 stars, if that makes sense. Anyways, enough of me talking. Let's get right on into the video. So the first book that we are going to talk about today is the second book in the Pendragon series. This is The Lost City of Far by DJ McHale. And this series is really, really interesting. This is more of like a middle grade series, but it is basically about a boy named Bobby who finds out in the first novel that he is kind of like a time traveler, and that basically there are all of these little mini universes all over that you kind of like time travel through, and that he is responsible for helping keep them all happy. There's like a villain, I guess, that is going around to each one of these little universes and trying to cause havoc and just like start a civil war basically. And so this young man is 14 years old and he is responsible for basically stopping this guy. His uncle has been going through the same thing, and so his uncle is kind of his mentor, and each book takes place on a different place, if that makes sense. So this one actually took place in a city called Chloral, and it is an underwater universe. So this was really, really cool. I gave this one a 5 out of 5. I wasn't 100% sure when I first started reading the series. I wasn't 100% sure on the first book. I did like it, but I was like, I don't know if this is for me, but I really enjoyed this one, especially the underwater aspect of it. I don't think I've ever read a book set underwater. So that was really, really cool. And you just get to know the characters a lot better. You start to become a lot more familiar with the characters. And I just really, really enjoyed the overall book. I think that, I don't know if this is DJ McHale's first series that he's written or anything like that, so I don't know if this is like his second book he's ever written, because I read the first one. But I feel as though his writing style improved as well, and just overall the story seemed more cohesive, if that makes sense. But yeah, so basically he goes into this vast world that is entirely covered by water. Chloral is nearing a disaster of huge proportions. Can Bobby help rid the area of marauders and locate the legendary lost land of Far, which may hold the key to Chloral's survival? So that was another really interesting part about this, is that they almost are looking for Atlantis. It's called Far, but basically it reminded me so much of Looking for Atlantis, and I really loved it. It was full of adventure, and yeah, 5 out of 5 for this one. The next book that I listened to this one on Audible, and it is a book about intuitive eating. So it is called Intuitive Eating. I think it's called An Approach That Works. Let me check. A revolutionary approach that works. So I have been really interested in the whole idea of intuitive eating lately. Like, I've always been a person that has been overweight. So I've tried so many different things in my life, and I keep going back to like, I just want to be normal with food. So, and that kind of is what this book teaches, and it's really, really interesting and something that I want to learn more about. But it's definitely an interesting approach that I had never really thought of before, but it makes so much sense. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5, and it's definitely something that I'm looking more into. As of right now, I am pregnant, so I won't be trying to lose any weight anytime soon. But yeah, it's definitely, it's an approach that you can just take for your whole life. Like, it's a lifestyle. It was really interesting. The next book that we are going to talk about is The Starlight Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and this one I gave a 4 out of 5. So I absolutely love Erin Morgenstern's writing. I have said anytime that I have ever talked about her on my channel, I refer to her as having lyrical writing. Like, it's so beautiful. It's pretty much like, it's just like poetry, like the whole entire book. And I just don't understand how somebody can write this beautifully. She just has a beautiful writing style. The one thing that did kind of keep me away from it being a 5 is that it was very long and very drawn out. And there were parts of it that were kind of boring. Like, really the only thing that pushed it into the number 4 spot is how beautiful the writing was for me. Also, the idea behind the book is absolutely incredible. I don't know where she comes up with these fantastic ideas, like the night circus as well as this one. This book takes place basically in an underwater library. So it's kind of like another dimension, that there are doors all over Earth. And if you happen to kind of step into one, you can find yourself at the Starlight Sea. And basically it is an underground sea with all of these like labyrinths of stories. So really, really interesting. There's all different kinds of like fairy tales like woven throughout it. And it amazed me how at the end she managed to make everything connect, because there's all these little like random stories. And I was reading it with my friend Georgia, and we were talking about it the one day, and she was like, am I supposed to be remembering all of these little stories? Because I don't think I'm going to remember them all, and I don't know how they're going to come together, but they all did come together. So yeah, Erin Morgenstern is so talented, and I really did enjoy this one. And if you are looking for something like completely magical and just something that as you read every page, and that's the other thing too, is that because it is such lyrical writing, you have to really pay close attention to the writing. A lot of times, like with young adult books, I will just like read them so fast that sometimes you don't really retain everything. You have to really pay attention when you're reading this book. But I really did enjoy it, and I gave it a 4 out of 5. The next book is The Devil You Know by Trish Doller. This one was a 5 out of 5, and this is a very fast-paced thriller. So this is also a YA, I guess I would say. It's a YA thriller, and it was very, very fast-paced. I read this, I think, in a day, maybe 2 days, and I really, really enjoyed it. I really love thrillers for when you're trying to A, get out of a reading slump, or B, you just want something like quick and just to kind of like get you into the mood of reading. Thrillers are really great for that. And this one is about a girl, I think her name is Katie Wells. She's kind of just been an average girl her whole life. I think her mom either left her family or passed away, possibly passed away when she was younger. So she's kind of like stepped into the mothering role of her younger brother, and her father is just like stuck in a pit of depression. So she is doing what she can. She's working lots, she's going to school, she's doing what she can to try to help keep this family together. And one day she decides to go off for a little weekend adventure. She goes to a party with her friend, and they meet a couple of cousins, and they kind of like set off on this adventure. And she kind of decides that she's going to just like leave it all behind for a weekend. Her family can survive without her. She has done so much, she deserves a break. So she takes off with these 2 guys, but she starts to realize that things are not what they seem with these 2 guys, and that something might be seriously wrong with one or both of them. And it starts to turn into a thriller, and it is really, really good. So I gave this one a 5 out of 5, very fast paced, and I really enjoyed the story as well. Next is the Doll Collection, which is a collection of horror stories revolving around dolls, and it is edited by Ellen Datlow, so it's got a bunch of different authors. And I really liked this one, you guys. I got this one in a My Thrill Club box a while ago, like a couple years ago. I haven't been getting My Thrill Club for a while, but I really enjoyed this one. And I was actually kind of surprised, because a lot of the My Thrill Club reads I ended up not really liking that much. And this is, I think, the first one that I've given a 4 out of 5 too. So each story is different, and there were a couple in here that were really, really spooky, and they all have to do around the themes of like haunted dolls. So yeah, if you are interested in that, I know so many people find haunted dolls so interesting. Yeah, I definitely recommend this one. It's kind of hard to give a really good review about short stories because they're all so different, but it had a really good range of stories, and like some just revolved around haunted dolls. Some revolved around people being creepy with dolls. Like, it just very, very diverse stories, and I liked almost all of them. Like, there was maybe a couple that I was like, meh, but for the most part, I really enjoyed this. Next is a book called The Safest Lies by Megan Miranda. This one is also another thriller, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 as well. And this one is really interesting because I am obsessed with missing people. I'm constantly watching on YouTube, like missing people and all that sort of thing, true crime, that kind of thing. So I'm really interested in that. And this story revolves around our main character, whose name is Kelsey. And basically, she's 17 years old, and she hardly ever steps outside of her home other than to go to school and come home, because her mother is extremely overprotective, because her mother was kidnapped 17 years ago and escaped being pregnant with Kelsey. So as you can imagine, once escaping from that situation, she has kind of become paranoid. Her kidnapper was never caught, and so her mother lives in this world like where she is absolutely terrified, and she is so overprotective of Kelsey, not wanting anything to happen to her, especially since this man was never caught. But one day, Kelsey comes home to find her mother gone, which never happens. Her mother never leaves the house. She works from home, she gets their groceries delivered, she never sets foot outside of their house. So when Kelsey comes home and finds her mother missing, she feels like she needs to help find her because nobody's really taking it seriously. People are thinking that this woman just ran off, and Kelsey knows that that would never happen to her mother. So she goes on the hunt trying to figure out what happened, where her mom went, and yeah, it's a really great thriller. The next book is another book that I listened to on Audible, and it is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5. So Taylor Jenkins Reid is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors, which is kind of weird because she does not write in the genre that I typically like to read in. She mostly does like historical fiction, and if you guys have read Daisy Jones and the Six, that took place in, I think, the 60s or 70s era, and this kind of takes place, the story kind of takes place more in like the 20s. So this book really reminded me of like the Marilyn Monroe age, and in fact, like the main character Evelyn Hugo really reminds me of Marilyn Monroe. And so I'm not 100% sure, but I'm almost positive, like if I had to guess, I would say that Taylor had used Marilyn Monroe as her inspiration for Evelyn Hugo. So I really, really enjoyed this one. This basically is about a woman who gets in contact with a journalist who is absolutely unknown at the time. And this woman, like Evelyn Hugo, is a huge movie star. It would be as if Marilyn Monroe is still alive today and wanted to sell her story or give her story away to a journalist who's completely unknown. Like, it just makes no sense. And this journalist is like, what? First of all, how did you even hear about me? I just work at this little paper and I just do barely anything. How did you hear about me, and why are you wanting me to put your story out there? Basically, Evelyn has very little time left. She has some bad news about her health, and she wants to set the record straight about her life and about all of her husbands. So she tells her the story of her whole entire life, and at the end there's a really big twist that comes. I will not give anything away, spoiler free, but I just really enjoyed it. I really love the way that Taylor Jenkins Reid writes. She really does her research on the eras that she's writing in, and you really feel as though you're there. Like, you feel as though you are in that time period. It just, she's so well researched, and I just really have enjoyed the last couple of books that I've read from her. So I can't remember if I said or not, but I did give that one a 5 out of 5. So next is a very thick book, and that is Sleeping Beauties by Owen and Stephen King. And I surprised myself with this one a lot. This one, as you can see, very thick, very intimidating to read. So I bought the Audible version of it, and I listened to half of it, and I physically read half of it. So whenever I was like going for a walk or in my car, I would be listening to it. And then whenever I was able to, I would sit down and read it, because I figured if I had to sit down and read this, it was going to take me forever. So I was actually able to get through this in under a week, probably 3 or 4 days. I really liked it, you guys. And that actually really surprised me, because Stephen King is very, I I don't know how to really say this because I love horror and that is the genre that I typically read in, but Stephen King is really hit or miss for me. I find I love his stories, I love his ideas, and I love, yeah, basically his idea for a story. Like, I really enjoy them, but it's his execution that I don't particularly appreciate. It's his writing style. He uses a lot of slurs, a lot of like just foul language that I don't think a lot of time adds to the story, and in fact it just turns me off of the story. So a lot of times I have issues with Stephen King for that reason. But this is the first thing I've ever read from Owen King, and so I don't know if it was his influence in this book that made me really enjoy it a lot more, but I absolutely love this one. I gave it a 5 out of 5. Basically, I read this right before the pandemic situation started. I think I finished it in February, and we started really getting hit with the pandemic in March. So that's basically what this is about. Basically, out of nowhere, women across the world, as soon as they fall asleep, they almost enter like a coma-like state, and they get like a web, like a spider's web, completely surrounds them and wraps them up. So, and they cannot be woken up. If they are woken up, they turn into like monsters and they kill whoever wakes them up. Like, they will just tear you to shreds if you wake them up. And what you find out in the story is that when they go to sleep, they're actually entering like an alternate dimension. So the women are still alive, but they are like in a separate dimension. And the men are here back on Earth, realizing all the women are just like, they're gone. Pretty soon, just gonna be a town full of men, and they don't realize that the women are still alive. Like, they are actually thinking that the women are dead, and they're trying to figure out what to do. So, very, very interesting. Definitely an interesting premise for a book. I'm glad I read it before the pandemic because I think it would have freaked me out a lot more had I decided to read. I probably wouldn't have started reading it now. But yeah, very, very interesting, very well executed, and I really like the writing style on this. It is very difficult to tell who is writing which parts. And I listened to, on Audible, they have like an interview with the authors afterwards, and they said that they did that on purpose because they did not want people to be able to go through and pick out like what is Stephen King's and what is Owen King's, and they did a really good job of that. The story flows really well, and you wouldn't really be able to tell that it's two different authors. And the only way that I wouldn't be able to tell is because it doesn't have that classic Stephen King like foulness to it, if that makes sense. The next book is the last book in a trilogy. This is The Sacrifice of Sunshine Girl, and this is by Paige McKenzie, and this is actually a trilogy that is based on a YouTube channel. And I think the YouTube channel is The Haunting of Sunshine Girl. So this is the third book in that series, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5. The other two, I think I had given 3 out of 5, just because I felt like they were a little bit drawn out. And this one I actually did like a lot more. It was a little bit more fast-paced, and it brought the story to a close in a really nice way. I really enjoyed the ending, and it like wrapped things up really nicely. So basically, if you've never heard of these books before, basically Sunshine is a girl that moves with her mom. She's adopted, and she moves with her mother to a new town, and they rent this house. And right away, like this is in the first book, she notices this house is definitely haunted. And throughout the story, she ends up finding out that she is a Luciche, which is somebody that can help people cross over. So once she hit, I think 16, spirits are drawn to her when they pass, and she has to help them pass over. So, but that being said, there's evil forces trying to stop her because they don't want these spirits to pass on into the light, and she has to deal with all of that stuff. So I really enjoyed the last book. Like I said, it brought everything together, had a good conclusion, and I liked it better than the first 2 books. So these next 2 books I'm going to talk about together, and that is The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer and The Evolution of Mara Dyer, both by Michelle Hodkin. And these are the first 2 books in a trilogy called Mara Dyer. And this basically, these books, I had a really hard time rating them, and I almost probably should have just rated them all a 3. But what happens is, in every single one of these books, it is so slow going to the point where you think like, I might DNF this. But then the last like quarter of the book gets so good and so fast paced that you're like, oh man, like I have to get on to the next one right away. If you know me at all, you know that I typically don't read series one after the other because I kind of get bored with the storyline and I want like something in between to break it up. This is the first series I think possibly ever that I have read back to back to back. I read all 3 of them in succession. And that's why, because the ending is like so crazy, and so you just want to get on to the next book, but then the next book starts out really slow as well. So it's kind of like I have mixed feelings about them. When I first picked up these books, I thought that they were going to be about a possession or about a haunting. I don't want to give too much away. Basically the books over the 3 books change, and it starts to actually turn into a story that is completely different than what it was setting itself up for in the beginning. Does that make sense? I mean, it's still creepy, it's still like haunting, but it definitely changes into something that I did not expect at all. I did not expect this story to go where it went. So yeah, I mean, in that regard, it's interesting. And I don't know if she did that on purpose. It was almost as if she had planned it to go one way and then completely decided to change course later on, because I didn't really see it coming where it went. I'm sorry, I'm so vague, but I really like, if I say too much, I will give this away. So anyways, I gave these ones a 4 out of 5. They possibly could have been 3 out of 5s. Let's just say they're a 3.5 out of 5. So the next book that I want to talk about is one that I have been wanting to read for a long time and did not have access to. So I don't know if you guys follow Peter Mon or any of his 5 channels that he has here on YouTube, but he's one of my favorite YouTubers. I watch most of his channels. He has a booktube channel, a drama channel, a vlog channel, a review channel, and a channel that he calls Peterisms, which is basically just stories about his life and things that he has learned along the way. So I really I watch almost all of his channels, and I really enjoy him. He's one of my favorite YouTubers, and he wrote a book years ago called The Before Now and After Then, and I wanted to read it for forever, but it wasn't available. I guess his publisher had closed, and he didn't have, like, there's no way to really buy the book right now. So he decided a couple months ago that he was going to read his entire book on his booktube channel. So I was so happy because I really wanted to read it for a long time, just because he's one of my favorite YouTubers. So why wouldn't you want to read their book that they put out? But yeah, it was really interesting. It's kind of a coming of age story of a young gay man coming out and like dealing with all of that, which is normally not the type of book that I would typically read. But I really enjoyed it. It was a shorter book. I enjoyed the characters, and he talked, like, I've listened to him talk about this book for so many years now. He's very like self-aware about his books and where there's problems with them and where he could have changed things. He wrote his book, I think, in like a month or a couple of months. So there's some ideas that are a little bit not flushed out. There's definitely an insta love in this story, and that's one of the things that he says that he wishes he would have changed a little bit, but at the time felt really right. So basically, yeah, it's a young man, kind of a coming of age story, and falling in love for the first time, and the heartbreak that comes with that, and the excitement that comes with that, and just being a gay teenager in today's crazy world, and how that affected this character. So I gave it a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy Peter Mon, and yeah, definitely check that out. It's on his booktube channel. If I remember, I'll have it linked in the description box below, but his channel is amazing. The next book is a book that the author sent to me, and this is Who's There by Demas Rio, and I was so excited to get this book. I was so happy that the author gifted this to me, so thank you so much, Demas, for giving this to me. I really enjoyed it. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and it is a short story collection basically revolving around the topic of who's there. So each story kind of deals with who's there as being like the main thread that kind of connects the stories. So a lot of them, I'm going to read you the back of this book. I would love it. I'm going to have it linked in my description box below. I would love it if you guys check this out. Like, especially, I think it's so important for us to try and support self-published authors, because not everybody gets picked up by, you know, like a huge publishing house, and it is really important for us to read works that are self-published because we all have a story to tell. I'm currently writing my book. I'm gonna try to get it, you know, traditionally published, but if I can't, then I will self-publish. So I think it's just really important because there is so many stories that don't get enough attention that need the attention, that deserve the attention. And I think this is one of them. So I'll read you the back. It says, a woman went missing a week before her wedding. A man recalling his nightmarish encounter with the devil. Letters sent from beyond the grave. A call from loved ones whose sins have passed. Limbs that have a mind of their own. These ghostly tales of revenge, greed, and desperation writhe and squirm in the dark corners of modern-day Indonesia. Rich in cultural undertones that are uniquely Asian, these stories are an equal part grotesque and poetic, irreverent and spiritual, unusual and universal. Drawing on local folktales of vengeful banshees, dusk-dwelling monsters, and other forms of the undead, this collection of 5 short stories will transport readers to the deep, dark abyss where demons forever resides, the human mind. So each story is completely different. I will say the first couple of them, I kind of like could see where they were going, and I kind of, because I read so much horror and thriller, like I've kind of like trained my mind to like figure out where things are going to go. So the first couple of stories I was kind of able to guess what was going to happen, but the next ones I wasn't able to figure that out, which is awesome. And there's some in there, like there's a story in here that is like on a deep level. It's not just like a horror, like jump scares or anything like that. Like there's a story in here that really kind of hits you in the feels. Guys, it totally cut me off as I was in the middle of saying something. I don't know where it cut me off, but basically what I wanted to say is I'm going to have this linked in the description box below, so definitely go and check it out if it sounds interesting to you at all. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it, and I just think this is going to be a great book if you want to start promoting some self-published authors, which I think is really important. Next, we have The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, and I gotta tell you guys a little bit of a funny story about this one. So we went to our family's cabin. I'm really lucky. My in-laws have a lakefront cabin that we are able to use whenever we want. So a couple weeks ago, we went there for the week, and I was like looking at books to bring, and I thought, this sounds great. It's a thriller about a woman in a cabin. That sounds perfect. Like, it's gonna be creepy. I'm staying in a cabin. The story's about a cabin. Guys, it's a cabin, like it's a cabin on a yacht. So nothing at all like what I thought it was gonna be. I thought maybe she's like staying in a haunted cabin, or like somebody's trying to break into the cabin while she's there. No, nothing like that at all. But basically, our protagonist is, what is her name? Lo. So her name is Lo, and I will say that I did not like Lo. She is not a lovable character at all. In fact, like for most of the book, I didn't really care what happened to her. Like, because she's just not a lovable character, and in several ways. But it was definitely a really unique story. And it's set on a boat, which is hard to do. Like, it's kind of hard to set a story on such a small area and have it retain interest. It's kind of similar to The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. Like, that's hard to write a book that actually keeps your interest in a setting that doesn't change, in a small setting like that. That's really hard to do. But Ruth did a really good job with that. She kept it fast paced. Basically, this woman, Lo, she goes on this cruise to kind of further her career. So she is a journalist, and this is like the maiden voyage of this cruise ship, and she goes to try to make some connections because she's hoping to further her career. But her first day there, she runs into this woman staying in the cabin beside her, and finds out later that no one actually is staying in that cabin, but she is 100% positive, and she has some physical evidence that this woman was there, and she spoke to this woman, but nobody seems to know her. She's in such a panicked state. She thinks that she hears this woman being murdered, basically, and she's in such a panicked state. She talks to everyone that works there. She's like, it's a small boat, and there's only, I think, 10 passengers or something like that. So she talks to everyone. Everyone is claiming they don't know what she's talking about. They don't know who this woman is. She's describing this woman and nobody has seen anyone like this, but she knows that she saw and spoke to this woman. So she's trying to figure out what has happened, what's going on, and then she starts to become a target, I guess you could say, because she is digging into this. So very, very interesting and definitely a good idea for a book for sure. So I give this one a 4 out of 5. Now this next book I also read while I was at the cabin, and this one was a good pick for being at the cabin. So this is called Ruthless by Carolyn Lee Adams, and this one is about a teenage girl who wakes up with a horrible headache and realizes that she is in the back of a truck and she has been kidnapped. The kidnapper takes her to a cabin in the woods where she escapes but is being completely pursued by this man. So right from the get-go, like literally the very first page, she wakes up and realizes that she's been kidnapped. So it is so fast-paced. I read this in a day and it just goes, and you're like, oh my God. So it was really, really good idea for a book. It was well executed. I will say I gave it a 4 out of 5, and the only thing that kept me from giving it a 5 out of 5 is that towards the end, like it kind of gets silly. Like things happen where you're like, okay, that would never happen. Like, and there's no way that would ever happen. This man that is pursuing her would have to have superpowers in order for that to happen. There's no way, no way. So there's some parts that are completely unbelievable. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I really like the main character. Like she is called Ruth. Her name is Ruth, but people call her Ruthless, and for a reason. She is a very, very strong-willed individual. And that was one more thing that I kind of was like, okay, she's supposed to be 17. I mean, I don't think that a 17-year-old would have quite this amount of confidence that this girl has. Like this girl is just like, she's got some wisdom behind her. I will just say that. And I don't think for her age that it's realistic that she would. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed this one and gave it a 4 out of 5. All right, you guys, are you still with me? The last book that we are going to talk about today is Psycho Sanitarium by Chet Williamson. And this is based off of Robert Bloch's Psycho. So I never actually read the original Psycho, and this is kind of based off what happens next after that book. But I know enough about Norman Bates and that whole situation. I watched Bates Motel, so I know enough about it that I was comfortable reading this, and I really enjoyed it, you guys. I gave this one a 5 out of 5. And basically this story takes place in the sanitarium where Norman Bates is held after all of his crimes have come to light. People start to go missing. There's talk about the sanitarium being haunted, and yeah, so there's like all these different kind of stories weaving together, and you're not sure if like you're going crazy reading this, or if like the perspective of the character that you're reading is crazy, or if there really is a haunting, or if people are going disappearing, or if people are getting murdered. You don't know what's going on until the end. And it is a pretty good twist at the end as well. I'm so sorry if you can hear my kid screaming. He's downstairs with his dad, and like seems like every time I want to film, he decides he's gonna have a temper tantrum. So there's that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed the writing. And this is the first book in a while that I have read that I haven't really wanted to end. Like I really like the atmosphere in which Chet creates this whole world. I really like it's very spooky, and it's just, I want to say comforting in a way, but that's so weird. Why would a sanitarium feel like comforting? But it kind of did. Like I just felt at home reading this, even though these characters are people in a sanitarium and there's ghosts, and I don't know what's wrong with me. But anyways, 5 out of 5 for this one. All right, you guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments down below what are your favorite reads that you've read so far this year, and I will see you in my next video.